Varkas de Sautoy.
I'm going to choose 17 minutes because 17 is prime number and 15 is a bit rubbish. It's divisible by 3 and 5. It always makes me laugh when I hear this title that I have, the Professor for the Public Understanding of Science, because it makes everyone think that I know the whole of science. Particularly when I took this job over, actually, I got these journalists ringing up, and they really did think I knew it all. So I remember this time when this journalist phoned me up, and the Nobel Prize for Medicine had just been announced, and it was an announcement for the discovery of telomeres. So this journalist said, "Oh, could you explain to us what a telomere is?" Now, I'm rubbish at biology, and so I'm really embarrassed to admit that I quickly went online. I was in front of my computer, got up Wikipedia, telomere. I quickly read it and then confidently told him, well, it's the ends of a DNA which to control the death of it, and he seemed to be convinced, and I got away with it. But it got me thinking, actually, there's no way that anybody now can know the whole of science. But then I began to think, well, could we as humanity actually know it all? Could there be a point when we know everything? And I think that desire to know is incredibly basic in us. It's almost like so basic, it's like the basic need to reproduce. And so here's Aristotle. He said, everyone by nature desires to know. This is the opening of metaphysics. And actually, I had a look. The word to know is actually one of only about 100 words that can be universally translated across all languages. Not even the word eat can be effectively translated into all languages. So to know is somehow incredibly basic. So in this book, I thought, actually, I would try and articulate, are there things in science? So in this book, I tried to say, are there any questions in science that by their very nature we will never be able to answer? Could we say now, categorically, that this is a question that nobody will be able to answer? Now, it's very dangerous at any point in history, actually, to try and articulate anything you don't know. And I kept this story of Auguste Comte, scientist in the middle of the 19th century, who very confidently asserted, we shall never be able to study by any method the chemical composition of stars. And it seemed totally convincing at the time. I mean, how on earth are you going to visit a star? We've never visited a star. So how are we going to know what it's made of? But what he didn't realize is that the star can come and visit us. The light from the star, 20 years later, they've been able to tell exactly what a star is made of. We know the chemical composition of a star. So it's very dangerous in this book to try and articulate, is there anything that we really cannot ever know? I decided to divide my book up into 7 edges of knowledge. Now, talk of the kind of known unknowns, of course, isn't unique to science. Politicians have talked about it. So here was Donald Rumsfeld's very famous statement when he was talking about weapons of mass destruction. He declared, there are known knowns. There are things that we know that we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know. And actually, Rumsfeld got awarded the Foot in the Mouth award by the Plain English Speaking Society for this statement. But I think that was incredibly unfair, because I think this is an incredibly good description of different states of knowledge. If you analyse it, it's absolutely the different sorts of knowledge. There's one that he's missed, actually, which is a very, I think, pertinent to a politician, because it is the unknown knowns. And as Slavoj Žižek pointed out, these are actually the kind of Freudian things that you know, but you kind of deny that you know, which I think is very much what a politician is all about. So I can't tell you about the unknown unknowns. They're the black swans that we just don't know when they're going to appear. So I'm going for, can we actually articulate that there'll be known unknowns, things that will be beyond knowledge forever? Now, one of the other things, when I took over this chair, the Public Understanding of Science chair, I took it over from a certain Richard Dawkins. Now, Richard Dawkins spent a lot of time talking not just about science, but also about religion. So I kind of braced myself for the onslaught of questions I was going to get about my beliefs in God when I took this over. And sure enough, the journalists started pouring in with, and what are you? Are you an atheist? Do you believe in God? So I to try and bat this away, I actually said, I'm a deeply religious man. My my faith is the Arsenal. Every Saturday I go to the Emirates and I sing my songs and I worship my idols and I have faith that next season we will win the Premiership. I'm celebrating St. Totteringham's Day yesterday, thankfully, because we did actually take over Spurs, which is, there is a God after all. But after a while, journalists wouldn't be satisfied with batting this away. And I remember one instance actually I got invited on to BBC Northern Ireland Radio on a Sunday morning on a philosophy and religion programme. I said, I'll do the philosophy, but not the religion. But it was very quick before the journalists got in. Okay, what are your beliefs in God? And so I was like, I really don't, okay. And eventually he pushed me and I said, okay, as a mathematician, what I want is a very good, clear definition, because we spend a lot of time proving whether things exist or they don't exist. So I said, okay, give me a definition and then I'll try and engage with you about whether I can prove such a thing exists or not. So he said, Marcus, it's something which transcends human understanding. Oh, sorry, that was not a Northern Ireland accent at all. What happened there? I won't do that again, sorry. My American was kind of a bit okay, but and I thought at the time that's a really something that transcends human understanding. Well, how can you engage with that? There's nothing that you can engage with. So I thought it was a cop out. But actually, as time has gone on, I thought that's actually quite an interesting definition of God. The things which transcend human understanding. Well, what? So I thought, perhaps I can apply my scientific mind to actually saying, well, what is that sort of God? The things that will always be beyond us. And actually, I talked to a philosopher, a friend of mine in New College, and he referred me to this guy, Herbert McCabe. He was a theologian in Oxford, actually a Marxist theologian. Get that, who wanted to be a Marxist theologian. And he said in one of his essays, to assert the existence of God is to claim that there is an unanswered question about the universe. So part of the exploration of this book is not just trying to articulate questions of science that might be unanswerable, but what sort of role do they play as unanswerable, transcendent things? Okay, so I've got about 10 minutes left now to try and tell you everything that we can't know. Okay, so as I said, I've broken this book up into 7 edges. So I'm going to try and take you through all 7 edges of knowledge in 10 minutes. Let's see. Right, so we're going to kick off with something that I think articulates somehow is the essence of our sort of unknowability. And each edge, I've taken an object with me. So the object of this one it's about trying to predict the future. Can we know the future? So I've actually, the object that I've chosen for this edge is a casino dice. So this is actually a dice that I picked up at the craps tables in Vegas. I was trying to apply my mathematics to be able to predict what it was going to do and take away a lot of money. Unfortunately, I lost a lot of money, but they let me take the dice away. So here's the dice. And now, my hero on my task to try and understand everything really is Isaac Newton, because Isaac Newton came up with the physical laws of motion and the equations of mathematics, the calculus, which helps us to make predictions into the future. So I really thought we should be able to know it all. He kind of articulated that the universe runs by mathematical equations, so surely we can know what's going to happen next. My nemesis on this journey to try and understand what's going to happen next is this guy here, Honoré Poincaré, who discovered the mathematics of chaos theory, which says that even if, you might think, well, I can approximately know, I can measure this, the detail of how this starts off, but even a very small change in initial conditions can cause this dice to do something maybe potentially very different. And I've got a beautiful example of how very simple systems can create incredibly difficult things to predict. It's this thing here. It's a pendulum. Now, a pendulum usually is so predictable, we use it to keep track of time. But this is a slightly different pendulum. This is what we call a double. Oh, wow. You see, a double pendulum. It's like a leg jointed here, but it's a very simple thing, just 2 pieces of metal. I have the equations for this. But to be able to try and predict what's going to happen next to this pendulum is incredibly difficult because of the mathematics of chaos theory. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to be away from the mic, but I'm just going to show you a few examples of what this thing does and how crazy it is to predict, hopefully. Even that's difficult to predict. Okay, I'm going to try and repeat that, and this is the point about chaos theory. I've got a little notch here which tells me where that started. table this for absolutely hours. But my time is running out. So, okay, so the point about chaos theory is that a very small change in the initial conditions can cause something to go in a completely different direction. So we have this thing called the butterfly effect, which means that a very small butterfly flapping its wings can cause the weather to completely change just due to the little change that the butterfly has caused. So this means it makes the future very difficult to predict because very small changes can cause dramatic effects even within 5 days for the weather. Now, I've taken some colleagues with me on my journey to the edges, and one of the colleagues I took with me on this journey about trying to predict the future is Lord Robert May, Bob May. He discovered that chaos theory affects so many things across the natural world, but he's now applying this to economics, and he's in the House of Lords trying to persuade politicians that they need to understand the mathematics of chaos theory. So he said to me, not only in research, but in the everyday world of politics and economics, we'll be better off if people realize that simple systems do not necessarily possess simple dynamic properties. So I said, how are you getting on with the politicians trying to explain a bit of chaos theory to them? And he said, Marcus, they're just interested in their egos here, and they're not interested in maths. So, okay, so that's what about my dice? Is that chaotic? You see, maybe this is just too delicate, and I can't predict what it's going to do next. But I got a bit of a surprise. Actually, if the table loses a lot of energy when I throw it on it, so it's got a carpet on it, then actually it's controlled by this top left-hand picture, which says actually that if you're in a kind of yellow region with the initial conditions, you can make a prediction. But as the table gets more and more rigid, so like this floor here, actually the picture gets more and more unpredictable until you hit this thing here, which is called a fractal. Now, fractal means that a very small, you zoom in on it, it has infinite complexity. So this says you really can't predict this if you're throwing it on the kind of floor like this. But on a soft table, maybe it is a little bit more predictable than you might think. Okay, so we're up to, gosh, I've got to do 6 minutes. We're going to do 6 edges. Okay, so where are we going next? Well, we're going to go to something, actually, the unknowability of that dice is actually about lack of information. But actually, physics has at its heart something which it says, actually, the nature of the universe is, by its nature, is unpredictable. There are things that we will never be able to predict, even if you know the complete details of the setup. And this is kind of captured by my second item, which I brought along with me, which is a pot of uranium. It's amazing what you can buy on the internet. So people seem quite happy with this, actually. There were some interesting comments at the bottom of this underneath. So glad I don't have to buy this from Libyans in parking lots of the Mall anymore. But the point about this uranium is that even though I know the complete setup of this uranium, I do not know when it's going to spit out the next bit of radiation. So it says here that it's spitting out radiation at 676 counts per minute, this little pot here, but it won't tell me exactly when it's going to spit out. And at its heart is this thing called the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. So I wore this shirt about Heisenberg. I'm trying to embrace Heisenberg and love him, but I absolutely hate him because he's articulated the fact that there are things that we can never know. Knowing when this is going to spit out a particle, we will never be able to do that because the nature of the universe is at heart probabilistic. So you never know where anything is until you observe it. It's kind of spread probabilistic out. You only know probably where it is. So everything's described by these things called probabilistic wave functions. Okay, and Einstein really hated this too. Einstein's with me. He wants everything to be predictable. He said, quantum mechanics is very impressive, but my inner voice tells me that it's not yet the real thing. The theory produces a good deal, but hardly brings us closer to the secret of the old one. I am at all events convinced that he does not play dice. So it's interesting because at the moment, a dice is the only way we have to predict this. But I believe that this may not be an edge. This may be just the fact that we haven't had a new Einstein who will come up with a new theory to tell us how and why this thing is spitting out radiation. Okay, so we've got let's see, I've got to do some maths now. 17 minus 13 is 4 minutes. Yeah, okay. My next edge, what I was interested in is to go inside my uranium, actually discover what it's made out of. So in the next stage, I say, how can you infinitely divide this, get closer and closer and closer and find out what it's made out of? The ancient Greeks thought this was made out of fire, earth, wind, and water, yeah. But then we discovered actually, no, there are things called atoms. And so uranium is on this periodic table. But we dig inside an atom. We find it's made out of electrons, protons, and neutrons. But then we can dig inside that and we discover that protons and neutrons aren't basic. We can pull those apart into something called quarks. Now we believe electrons and quarks are the bottom of the layer. How do we know that? Why won't it do something else? Why won't it suddenly pull apart and become something else? So is this something we can never know? I mean, actually, if we pull it apart, if we go really into the center of this thing, you find actually maybe it's full of little bits of string vibrating. So again, this might be something, how can you know you're at the last layer and there may not be another discovery waiting for us to discover what this is made of. So I went deep down inside my uranium and then I decided to go way out into the universe. So the next edge was, well, what about our universe? How big is that? Does it go on forever? Is it infinite? Is our universe infinite? So I started with our first ideas, which we had this kind of Earth, and there was some sort of big globe around it with stars on it. But then as we zoomed out, we found that, no, we were part of a solar system, which a solar system was part of a galaxy. The galaxy was part of loads of galaxies. And now we pulled this apart and we realized that actually there's a big bubble around us beyond which we cannot see anything because light travels at a finite speed. And so information beyond this bubble, which is expanding, we can never know about that. In fact, now we think that our universe is part of a multi-universe. So how ever are we going to know that? How will we ever know whether it goes on infinitely often? Now, I've been given the 2 fingers by my person at the front here. So, gosh, and how many edges? Oh, well, we're going to do time. Okay, time. Yeah, time's running out, so I can't tell you about that one. Well, I was going to say St. Augustine couldn't tell us about that, is there? What then is time? If no one asks me, I know not. I know. If I wish to explain it to one that asketh, I know not. I was going to tell you about the Big Bang and Roger Penrose, but I won't do that. So let's whiz off now to another one, which is inside your own brain, actually. So this is the hard problem of consciousness. Are you a load of zombies out there? Am I the only one who has consciousness? So I'll just say Wittgenstein and Beatles, and that's probably enough for that one. And so the last edge is actually mathematics. So I've got 20 seconds to tell you that mathematics actually can prove to you that there are things that you can never know. And mathematics is probably our best tool in trying to understand what the limitations of our knowledge is. So that was a 15-minute or 17 minutes, because I love prime numbers, whistle-stop tour of what we cannot know. If you really want to know what it is we cannot know, then this is your Baedeker to the edges of knowledge. Thank you.